Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. The Squadron 42 monthly report has released, so today I'll be breaking it down and going through the need to know. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members, and to all of the super thanks as well, very much appreciated. Big thank you to Joe Hobbs, who is my latest channel member. Thank you so much for the support. So, kicking off as usual with the wonderful work from the AI content team. Their main focus was adding background life to the Shubin station, which partly involved motion capture of the commuter behaviour, and this included people waiting for a tram to arrive, getting frustrated if it didn't come on time, sleeping across benches and falling asleep in chairs, much of which we actually saw on Star Citizen Live recently. The team also wrapped up on the arcade machine, ensuring that there was enough animation variety. The main aim being, they say, is to prevent the player from seeing any repeated animations, although I am the kind of person that will literally sit there and watch them all until they begin to repeat, so good luck with that. The next step, they say, is to hand this usable to the UI team for the finishing touches, which include on-screen visuals of games being played, scoreboards and game over screens, a screen that I am very familiar with, in fact. Finally, for AI content, bug fixing and feature work continued for the deck crew, with the team enabling the AI to interact with the Gladius's rear fuel port, and next month the team aim to add a pushable diagnostics cart and dynamic conversations to the behaviours. Really hope that we can actually have a usable diagnostics cart device type thing to push around and plug into our ships, maybe to give a reading of what needs to be done where and the different states of each component. I think that would be pretty cool. Now for the AI features team, they continued to refine and improve the close combat and cat and mouse gameplay sections. On the human side, they worked to implement the new weapon accuracy system that will give greater control to the designers, particularly over difficulty and playability. So previously weapons would fire down the barrel, and any inaccuracy would have to come through the simulation of wrong aiming direction, the seek time, and the character's aiming and recoil, and now it takes various factors into consideration when choosing if a shot hits or misses, including distance to target, how long the target has been seen, the angle to the shooter, and the base accuracy of the AI that's firing. And once the decision to hit or miss has been taken, an appropriate firing direction will be chosen, which all basically means designers will have much more flexibility to create engaging and enjoyable scenarios, like how likely off-screen NPCs are going to hit the player, as being shot from off-screen, they say, isn't a fun experience. Now I get what they're doing here for a single player game specifically, but I do like the challenge, and I think this will be the case for the PU, where if there's a sniper out in the distance and he's hiding and you're taking shots, you'll have to take cover and then try and figure out where they are. So I hope when it comes to the PU, if I understand this correctly, it'll be a little different and they can shoot without being seen, kind of, if that makes sense. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to AI tech. They worked on spaceship functionalities, including several improvements to quantum travel and quantum boost, and now ships can accelerate while spooling before the actual jump. And this functionality was also exposed as an assignment for missions. They also addressed feedback received regarding NPCs pushing trolleys, with the team now having better control over what forces are applied to the trolley by using an angular and two linear PID controller. Not sure what the PID is. Position identifier maybe? I don't know. Please do let me know in the comments. But the team also improved the exact positioning logic at the end of the path and added stuck detector usage. So I guess if an NPC with a trolley gets stuck anywhere, it could be figured out. Now for human combat, an initial skeleton of the defend area assignment was assigned to allow the designers to specific areas that NPCs can use for their behaviors. So for example, guards will use this to understand which zones they should be patrolling. This will be quite nice in the PU, especially if there's like a derelict or an outpost where they want to have static guards or patrolling guards around the entrance, giving a bit more life to it. They also improved the friendly fire validation and can now assign different factions different behaviors, which include things like bad guys where they only try to preserve the life of their group, or good guys where they will try to avoid hitting neutral factions like civilians, for example. Now onto the AI vehicle feature team. They completed the Flight AI tool that enables developers to control and set up specific AI scenarios across various ships. Currently they are porting the new dive attack maneuver to the combat pilot AI, which allows reckless and aggressive pilots fighting against capital ships to dynamically choose this maneuver when required. For the animation team, the motion capture team worked with the gameplay team on Vanduul combat and pre-post viz for searching, which involved bringing the designers, coders and animators together with the Vanduul actor for the mocap session, which allowed the team to quickly try out new ideas and improve the existing version of the Vanduul character. Now this data was then worked on and added into the game as close to the on-set performance as possible, with the team currently adjusting the animations for weight and game balance and adding any required additional micro transitions. So it looks like they're polishing the movement and combat abilities of the Vanduul, getting the actors back in to just refine the moves, which, as I've said before, I really look forward to seeing these Vanduul in action. Now on the gameplay side, animation progressed with various social AI aspects, including beds, the chow line, arcade machine assets, female characters sitting on bar stools, standing console updates, drinking in various usables, and many more. AI locomotion progressed as well, with the team testing overlays on the base cycles so that NPCs appeared to be thinking about what they're doing rather than just moving forwards. I do enjoy reading about all of these little intricacies that CIG go to with everything that they work on. They're not just trying to create a means to an end, they are trying to perfect every aspect of pretty much everything to be as wholesome as possible. And I do appreciate that effort because I do think it will pay off big time when it all comes together. Now finally, for the animation team, R&D locomotion improvements continued while custom locomotion fixes were made for certain named characters, plus they also progressed with zero-G, heavy landings to ledges from jumps, and helmet usage. Now onto the character art team. They worked on UEE Navy outfits and the Screaming Galson's armor, which are a faction within the Squadron 42 campaign, plus they also worked on the final version of the hair shader. Finally, this new hair shader has been in the works for quite a few years now, so let us hope that we get to see it as soon as possible, and as they are working on the final version, it might mean that this will come to the PU once they've finished implementing it to the Squadron 42 campaign. Now for the engine side of things, the physics team added a new dynamic entity to simulate rope running over a pulley wheel, so shedding a little bit more light into what the need for rope physics were since we first heard about this. Was it 2, 3, maybe a few more months ago? On the renderer side, work on the Gen 12 transition continued with the pipeline to render cube maps enabled, and Gen 12 support for fog volumes and various other render nodes was also enabled. A new reflection buffer API was implemented, amongst other advances and conversions. The Gen 12 port of planetary ground fog was completed, and Gen 12 ports of atmosphere and volumetric cloud rendering commenced. Additional improvements to planet terrain height map rendering and spherical cloud and planet terrain shadow rendering were made as well. So continuing to get this Gen 12 conversion done, many things now being supported, so it does sound like it won't be long until it is completed and then they can start bringing in the Vulcan API. Now on the core engine side of things, various improvements were made to the profiling system. Support to collect peaks was also added to prioritize optimization tasks. Also, power scaling is now disabled for all threads and engine spawns with normal or time critical priority, which they say helps thread scheduling, so main, render, physics, batch and worker threads, and this will improve performance. And finally, additional optimizations were made, including removing the final lock in the background job manager and checking authority requirements when activating component updates. Now, moving on to the gameplay story team, they worked through mocap from a previous session, allowing them to complete numerous small updates to various scenes, including some for chapters 1 and 5, also a technically challenging scene involving 2 characters unloading crates from a spaceship was finished and is looking great in-game. And finally, for gameplay story, incremental improvements were made to the walk and talk animation to keep the characters looking natural and alive. Now, this walk and talk system or feature is where when you are walking and talking to an NPC character, they're not marching off ahead, they're reacting to you if you're stopping and starting and whatnot, making it a little bit more natural, which I will say in many games, you either walk too fast or you're having to jog to keep up. So it's nice to have a bit more granularity to that. So moving on to the graphics and visual effects programming team, the work on damage maps continues, with the team focusing on debris, creating its own map based on the parent map, which does sound pretty cool. They also implemented an interface for querying damage within an area and persistent snapshots, as well as optimizations for processing hits. I think we'll hear a little bit more about this in the PU monthly report, as it does focus a little bit more on salvaging. Now for Gen 12, for the graphics and VFX teams, they improved the viewpoint API and continued porting the region copy pass in render to texture to Gen 12. They also enabled more stages and systems to work with Vulkan, including material fallbacks and depth readback. Fixes were also made to the tessellation outpost of organic shaders and planet array textures, not using texture 2D arrays. Finally, they refactored screen capture to work with Vulkan and updated to the latest SDK. So they're actually making a lot of progress by the sounds of things with Vulkan itself, and I do know that once Gen 12 is in, Vulkan is literally not that far behind. I think that was mentioned by one of the devs recently. So they are definitely well underway with making sure that when they are done with Gen 12, they can make that flip. I obviously don't know how fast it's going to be, but they did specify that it will come shortly afterwards. Now for the level design team, the FPS team completed the layout of 2 key chapters, and once implemented, they will be ready for final balancing and testing. Some of them also moved on to finalizing content for the next set of chapters ahead of the next quarter's goals. So making great progress there if it's ready for the final balancing and testing, just to make sure that it performs as it should. The space and dogfighting team expanded their focus to the first half of the game, implementing recently completed and polished mechanics, with the aim being to have a large section of the game fully playable. Really happy to hear this. Of course, this isn't the full game from start to finish, but a big chunk of it in terms of level design getting fully playable so that they can play through it, test it out. Again, I wouldn't expect this to include things like the downstream stuff, like maybe visual effects, audio, final polish, and that kind of thing. It might do, I don't know, but getting a fully playable section is definitely a big win. Finally, for the level design team, or the social design team, they continued their ongoing task of implementing all in-game scenes. Now, on to the narrative team. They continued their in-depth level reviews last month, including a moment-to-moment breakdown of a specific chapter to discuss any remaining narrative need to support the latest gameplay. This, it says, included 2 revised puzzle scenarios and a tutorial sequence to account for possible hints and/or dialogue support the player may need. The team also dedicated time to further broadening some of the narrative collectibles that players will be rewarded with if they thoroughly explore the various levels in-game. I will certainly be trying to uncover every collectible, but I do wonder if these collectibles that we find throughout the campaign can be brought over into the PU once you complete it. Being able to maybe keep certain items you find on your travels to sell on or display on your home. I really hope that is the case, because I would love that idea. That would really encourage me to spend more time exploring. Obviously, in a single-player game, once you've completed it, that's it. Whereas Squadron 42, if you complete Squadron, it will have knock-on effects in the PU. We are still to know exactly what, and it was years ago that they mentioned anything of any kind of knock-on effect, like becoming a citizen rather than just being a civilian. But if we can actually collect items like Vanduul artifacts or other items that we find on our travels and keep them in the PU, that would be so cool. Now, next up, we have the QA team. They supported cinematics by reproducing issues found during development and chasing up outstanding bugs still causing issues. They also worked on bug validation and reporting and continued to make video recordings for review. It'll be very interesting to see just how buggy Squadron 42 will be when it releases. Hopefully not at all, of course, but without having all of us testing it and checking it and helping to report those issues, I wonder how it's going to be, because a lot of AAA games that release are very buggy at times. Now for AI, the QA team worked on several narrative scenes to confirm fixes and that the general flow is consistent. And finally, checklist testing began, with QA regularly testing FPS and ship sections featuring the Vanduul. You lucky bastards. Now, for the tech animation team, they spent part of the month addressing small tasks that will improve the quality of life for all devs. So very important. Several of these revolve around the asset pipeline in Maya, which was refactored to consolidate multiple workflows, plus galvanize the core pipeline code with the knowledge gained throughout the production so far. Some fancy words there, always making those tool improvements, which is definitely a great way of speeding up development. Now, one of the team's new initiatives to load skin data from the engine's data files is yielding excellent results, with a 1200% speed increase in loading data. Pretty impressive. And finally, they also continued with another long-standing initiative to replace slow rigging solutions with a new plugin. Now, I don't know if this relates in terms of rigging to character rigging. I would think so, with it being the animation tech side of things, but hopefully if they can speed this whole process up, then when they start creating creatures and fauna, then we can start seeing them come along a bit quicker. Now, for the UI team, the artists and designers worked on a variety of screens for 2 key levels. Some are at the early stages, whereas others are nearing completion. New door panels were created that will be used throughout Squadron, while the programmers developed AR box outs, which is pop-up information that floats over the game screen to give more information about selected things. Now, personally speaking, I would much prefer no UI at all, but for a single player game, this floating info should be fine, but I do hope that either A, it won't be seen in the PU at all, which I do think that is the case. I don't think we will see big floating text giving hints, or B, we can opt out to toggle it off if that is possible to play through Squadron without it being there, because I do tend to turn off, even in single player games, I will turn off all the UI if possible to get a more engaging experience. So finally, we have the visual effects team, who continued to work with art and design teams, with 2 larger levels receiving a cleanup visual effects pass, with the team saying, "This is good practice when a level has existed for a long time and has lots of older content. This basically brings the level up to date, ensuring there are no ugly or unoptimized effects still in there." So very important in my opinion, just to make sure that everything is on par with everything else and there are no deviations. The team also continued to work on a highly complex destruction sequence, and finally they reviewed the gas cloud setup to ensure that it's still functioning as expected, and investigated cross-team options for in-game destruction. So some great progress making way as usual. Still very quiet on showing us anything visual about Squadron 42. Of course, they don't want to reveal anything at all by the looks of things, but hopefully we will be able to see some little snippets of progress soon, as I am really dying to see how all of this will look once it comes together. But with that said, if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing, and if you want to hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother, you are all more than welcome. I will be back to streaming. It's getting closer. We're almost there. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, does the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.